Chosen if the Cardinals decide to draft Kyler Murray at number 1. Sports Center, 6 Eastern. All right, here we go, guys. The Combine has come and gone, so it's time for Todd McShay's latest mock draft. The hottest name in this year's draft is now at number 1. Kyler Murray going to Arizona, bumping Nick Bosa, Max's favorite, to San Fran at number 2. Montez Sweat and DK Metcalf bolt into the top 10 after standout performances in Naptown. As for the quarterbacks, Dwayne Haskins goes to the G-Men at number 6. And Drew Lock leaping up to the Finns at number 13. Joining us now, the man himself, Todd McShay. Hey, Todd, how we doing? Todd, you got me?
Todd, you got us?
We don't got you.
Todd.
No, we don't hear Todd. We don't hear Todd.
He's waving.
Hey, Todd.
All right. All right.
All right.
Well, let them get that. Let them get that.
Let's pause on that.
Yeah.
And
by the way, Joey Bosa is awesome, but so is Quentin Williams. I mean, like, you have two.
Of course.
You have
You've
two
been
guys
high
at
on
the
the
top.
Bosas all along, though. His
Yeah, you
brother
got two
so.
defensive monsters at the top of that draft.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, while we're trying to get Todd, why don't we talk about Antonio Brown here, guys? Mm-hmm. So the drama has obviously continued, but we could have a resolution by the end of this week. So sources tell our Adam Schefter that teams who have spoken to the Steelers about Brown have been told a deal is expected to be in place this Friday. Stephen A., I'll start with you. It's your squad. Where do you expect Brown to land?
Where do I expect him to land? I have no idea, to be quite honest with you.
Where
it
do
would
you
be
want
nice.
him to land?
Well, me personally speaking, my preference would be he worked it out in Pittsburgh, and that nobody comes up with enough for Pittsburgh to bite and trade him. But if for aesthetic purposes, if I had my preferences, I'd love to see Antonio Brown in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers throwing him the football. I would love to see that. Either that, or I want him to go to Tampa in a trade so Pittsburgh can get Deshaun Jackson. I mean, Deshaun Jackson is due to make about $10 million this year, assuming it's guaranteed, which I doubt. It's probably more along the lines of 3 to 6. But if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers and I got Juju Smith-Schuster, who's the number 1, and I'm looking to replace Antonio Brown and make sure I don't end up empty-handed for him, I'd trade him to Tampa. I'd try to convince Bruce Arians to take him, and I take Deshaun Jackson. But if I can't do that, then I want him with Aaron Rodgers because he's a bad man. And he ain't ever had a target this elite. And Aaron Rodgers throwing Antonio Brown the football would be something to behold. That I would say.
I will choose. You chose 2 teams. I'll choose 2 different teams. But sure. I'll say this. The weird thing was this morning, some Cleveland Browns players were sending out some weird tweets, and I was getting nervous when Jarvis Landry tweeted, wait a minute, is Odell on his way to Cleveland? Could you imagine if that was misdirection by the Steelers and the best offer they're going to get, because they have a ton of draft picks, is from the Browns, and they trade him in the division to an arch rival with a great young quarterback? Ooh. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think, Stephen A., Oakland is a real possibility, not just because they're the Raiders, but because you got to find out about Derek Carr. You know, it's not Amari Cooper we're talking about. This is Antonio Brown. The man is always open. Okay, Derek Carr, with a quarterback whisperer for a coach and a guy who's always open for a wideout, what can you do now? I think that's a real possibility. And the other team, I would say, which would be a good fit for some of the same reasons he'd be a fit with Aaron Rodgers, is the Colts. The Colts have a ton of cap space. And if Antonio Brown is interested in playing with a good quarterback who's not going to ever throw him under the bus, you know, Andrew Luck is the anti-Roethlisberger. Everything he says is the politically correct football statement. And by the way, it doesn't ever seem like it's because he's trying to be politically correct. It seems to me because that's who Andrew Luck is. He drank the Kool-Aid as a kid and just lives, breathes, eats, sleeps, doing it the right way, supporting his teammates the right way, all that stuff. So Antonio wouldn't have to worry about being thrown under the bus or anything like that. He'd be playing with a big-armed, strong, mobile quarterback on a really good up-and-coming team, and it would make a lot of sense.
I can't blame you for saying that. I just think that when you think about Aaron Rodgers, think about the greatness that we attach to this man. I consider him the greatest talent at the quarterback position I've ever seen. I know how you feel about him. And the best receiver that he's ever had was Jordy Nelson. Just think about that for a second.
Who was a hell of a receiver.
Yeah, who was a hell of a receiver. Please don't get me wrong. Randall Cobb, too. Don't get me wrong. Devontae Adams is no joke. He's not a scrub. But I'm just saying, when you hear those names, clearly they're not on the level that Antonio Brown is on.
Right.
And for Aaron Rodgers to be devoid of that kind of weapon, you got to remember, whether it's Joe Montana or Steve Wright, Steve Young, they did have Jerry Rice now. They did have Jerry Rice. When you talk about Troy Aikman, he did have the playmaker now. I mean, when you think about some of the great quarterbacks, even going back to the days of Dan Marino, you did have Mark Clayton and Mark Super Duper now. I mean, Terry Bradshaw.
Tom Brady
you did
had
have
Randy Moss in his
and
best
John
season.
Stowart. Tom Brady had Randy Moss once upon a time. Aaron Rodgers has never had that dude. And just imagine what it would be like for him if he did. But I think it's worth a consideration.
But Rodgers always has had really good receiving corps.
That's true.
No one guy who you're like, that's the best receiver I've ever seen. But like 2 or 3 guys who can really catch the ball. What he's never had is a threat out of the backfield like Le'Veon Bell. Which is why when you talk about the 2 Steelers offensive stars who are available now, Le'Veon Bell is a free agent. Bell is the guy I look at because play action with a guy like Le'Veon, who you could use on every down because you could split him out wide. You could put him in the slot. You can run him out of the backfield. I just think about that offense with the receivers who are already in place and Le'Veon Bell, and I think, how do you stop that? So when I think of Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers acquiring one of those Pittsburgh guys, I think of Le'Veon.
All right, let's get to some future superstars, and I apologize for the technical difficulties earlier, but Todd, I think we got you now. Are you all good? Perfect. There we are. Good to have you with us. Hope you had a wonderful time.